Now, my next guest has taken a deeper look at these numbers than most. Robert Embree is the vice president and senior economist at Rosenberg Research, a macroeconomic research company, and he is joining us from our Toronto studio today. Robert, thank you so much for coming in to help us dig a little deeper on this.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
So Canada's unemployment rate reaching its highest since the COVID-19 pandemic. I assume you watched this obviously very closely. Have there been warning signs leading up to this? Did you anticipate it?
Well, last month's job numbers were also quite weak. We lost 41,000 jobs last month, and that means that's the largest two-month job loss, over 100,000 jobs in over 3 years. We've seen a lot of signs that the Canadian economy is slowing, and it's the size of the job loss today that's really stunning, not the fact that we lost jobs at all.
I remember last month talking about this, and particularly youth unemployment between the ages of 15 and 24, and it still remains very high at 14.5%. What does it tell you about the state of economy, the Canadian economy, particularly when you look at that demographic?
Well, Canada's had structurally low growth the last few years. We had a whole graduating class of college graduates last year who had a hard time finding work, and now, of course, just like every year, a new class. It's a real problem because the first thing that employers do before laying people off is they're going to slow their pace of hiring. So anyone newly entering the labor force is going to be at the bottom of the ladder.
And it's not just those new younger hires. Sectors like the auto industry have been very hit hard amid this, of course, ongoing trade war with the United States. Auto manufacturing hubs, Windsor and Oshawa, now facing the highest unemployment rate in the country. How concerning is that?
It's very concerning, and Prime Minister Carney today announced a number of initiatives that will either help or work with that sector in terms of industrial policy. The problem is those types of programs, changes to mandates and reskilling, those are all very long-term things. That's going to take a long time to turn around, whereas this is a sector that's in a lot of pain right now.
Does that sector, is it able to turn around in any way quickly given the lead up to this? I mean, I think we've been talking about that sector being hit hard now for months given what's going on with the United States. Is this, do you think, likely to be long term in that sector?
Well, one tool that governments have is to use monetary policy, lower interest rates, which would also lower the Canadian dollar and help the competitiveness of Canadian exports. That would benefit the manufacturing sector and the auto sector more broadly. The Bank of Canada seems increasingly likely to cut rates in September, and many people are expecting 2 or 3 additional cuts over the next 4 meetings. That will somewhat help the auto sector, but as I say, these policies take time to be implemented, and it looks like the Bank of Canada, in retrospect, might have wished they'd cut a little faster.
The other thing that I guess can be done, and one policy that was talked about by the Prime Minister announcing today the federal government's plans to extend EI to 65 weeks for long-tenured workers. Is this kind of a smart move on behalf of the Carney government?
Absolutely, it can be if it's paired with an effectively designed program for reskilling. They were talking about something like 50,000 people. A program that's really effective might well have to be much larger than that, given the scale of dislocation that's been happening. But potentially as part of a broader industrial strategy, I think it's very promising.
I can just hear the other side, those who might not advocate for EI, saying that the kind of, programs and policies being announced are very expensive. What would you say to that?
Well, in the short run, some type of fiscal stimulus is going to be called for. And I think the question for politicians is, how long do you want to keep those kinds of programs in place?
And you did talk about, you talked about the slashing of the interest rate or bringing it down. What can the government do to mitigate the economic impact here?
Well, as I said, most of the programs that Prime Minister Carney talked about today and other things that the Liberals have been talking about over the last 3 months, things like speeding up approvals for projects, things like procurement reform to buy Canadian, those are all potentially very pro-growth policies, but they take 6, 12, 18 months really to see any effect. So they should also be considering faster-moving fiscal stimulus programs, which could include a tax cut. It could include some type of corporate tax reform to help Canadian consumers and businesses right now.
And they possibly also take some cooperation in Ottawa amongst the politicians. But that's for another guest, another time. Thank you, Robert Embree, Vice President and Senior Economist at Rosenberg Research, a macroeconomic research company. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.